The ambush. The remains of Nova Station drifted silently in the cold void of space, once home to 12,000 scientists, engineers, and their families. It was now a graveyard of twisted metal and frozen debris. Among the wreckage, the UES Phoenix waited, its systems running on minimal power, its hull carefully positioned to appear as just another piece of destroyed infrastructure. Captain Ilara Voss stood motionless on the bridge, her dark eyes fixed on the tactical display. At 42, she had more combat experience than anyone else in the fleet, experience that had etched deep lines around her eyes and streaked her once black hair with silver. But none of those battles compared to what they were about to attempt. "Status report," she said quietly, her voice barely audible in the hushed atmosphere of the bridge. Commander Raj Patel, her executive officer, looked up from his console. "All systems nominal, Captain. We're running at 5% power. Our heat signature is masked within acceptable parameters, and our position is stable within the debris field. We look like just another piece of wreckage." Voss nodded. "And the crew?" "Ready," Patel replied. 350 of humanity's finest, just waiting for your order." 350 against a Kordax fleet of 67 ships. On paper, it was suicide. But the Phoenix wasn't an ordinary warship. "Dr. Chen," Voss called to the science station, "how's our special package?" Dr. Mei Chen looked up from her monitors, the blue light reflecting off her glasses. "The quantum displacement system is functioning perfectly, Captain. All simulations are green. We've never field-tested it against actual Kordax technology, but the theory is sound. The QDS was humanity's greatest secret, a revolutionary system that allowed matter to partially phase between dimensions, making the Phoenix capable of appearing and disappearing almost instantly. In theory, it could even pass through solid objects. The Kordax, with their rigid tactical doctrine and crystal-based technology, wouldn't know what hit them." "They'll be back," Voss said, returning her gaze to the viewport. "The Kordax never miss an opportunity for propaganda. They'll want to document their great victory over the humans." The destruction of Nova Station 3 days ago had been a devastating blow. 12,000 lives lost, decades of research destroyed. Earth Command had been ready to sue for peace, afraid that further resistance would lead to more civilian casualties. But Voss had proposed a different approach. Show the Kordax that attacking human outposts carry consequences. "Contact." Lieutenant Olivia Reed called from the sensor station. Multiple signatures entering the system. Transponder codes match known Kordax patterns. The bridge crew tensed, but remained silent, professional. "Numbers?" Voss asked. 43 vessels, Captain. Mostly cruisers, with 5 capital ships leading the formation. They're moving slowly, deliberately. Standard victory procession. Voss allowed herself a small smile. Just as predicted. They're coming back to admire their handiwork. The tactical display showed the Kordax vessels approaching in their characteristic diamond formation. The aliens were insectoid in nature, with a rigid hierarchical society that valued order and precision above all else. Their ships, crystalline structures that somehow traveled through space, reflected this mentality. Beautiful, symmetrical, and predictable. "Time to intercept?" Voss asked. 17 minutes at current speed, Captain, Reed replied. Voss turned to face her crew. In the dim red emergency lighting, their faces looked determined, focused. They all knew what was at stake. After the destruction of Nova Station, the Kordax had broadcast a message across all frequencies: surrender or face extinction. This wasn't just a battle for survival, it was a statement that humanity wouldn't bow to threats. "Begin final systems check," Voss ordered. "I want everything verified one last time before they get here." The bridge came alive with quiet activity. Fingers moved across screens, running diagnostics and checking weapons. Deep inside the ship, the QDS ran its own checks, the quantum processors calculating billions of possibilities per second. Lieutenant Commander Jackson at Weapons Control looked up. "All weapon systems checked and ready, Captain." targeting systems calibrated and locked. The new resonance torpedoes are armed and ready for deployment. The resonance torpedoes were another innovation, specifically designed to exploit a weakness in the Kordak's crystal ships. The crystalline structures that made their vessels nearly impervious to conventional weapons also made them vulnerable to specific harmonic frequencies. These torpedoes would vibrate at exactly the right frequency to shatter the enemy ships like wine glasses in an opera house. Dr. Chen, begin QDS pre-activation sequence, Voss ordered. Chen nodded, her fingers dancing across her console. QDS powering up. Quantum field stabilizing. We'll be ready to shift on your command, Captain. Voss walked to her command chair, but remained standing. From her pocket, she took a small, worn photograph, her daughter Celia with her husband David on their small farm in New Montana. Celia would be turning 16 next month. Voss had promised to be there for her birthday. It was one more reason to make sure this mission succeeded. They're entering visual range, Reed announced. Their weapons are cold. They're not expecting any resistance. Through the viewport, Voss could see them now, the Kordak ships gleaming like diamonds in the starlight, their crystal hulls refracting the light of the system's sun into prismatic patterns. Beautiful and deadly. They're launching observation drones, Reed continued, starting their recording. All stations, Voss said into the ship-wide comm. This is the captain. In a few minutes, we're going to remind the Kordaks why they should have left humanity alone. Each of you volunteered for this mission, knowing the risks. I want you to know that whatever happens next, we're making history. She clicked off the comm and turned to Paddle. Begin power-up sequence. Let's wake our sleeping dragon. Throughout the Phoenix, systems began coming online. The fusion reactor spun up from standby to full power, energy flowing through conduits that had been dormant for hours. Weapon systems initialized, shield generators charged, and the QDS reached full operational status. Enemy fleet is in position, Reed reported. They're fully deployed in standard observation formation. Their drones are active, transmitting propaganda footage back to their home systems. Voss took a deep breath. Everything they had trained for, everything they had planned, came down to the next few moments. The Kordaks had never faced anything like the Phoenix. They didn't know that humans, when pushed to the edge, were at their most innovative and dangerous. Dr. Chen, is the QDS ready? Voss asked. Yes, Captain. Quantum displacement field is stable. All calculations are complete. We can execute on your command. Voss finally sat down in her command chair, gripping the armrests. Send final status check to all stations. One by one, the reports came back. Engineering ready, weapons ready, medical ready, QDS ready. Every department, every system prepared for what was about to happen. All hands, Voss said, her voice calm and steady. Prepare for combat. We are go for Operation Phoenix. She paused for one heartbeat, then gave the order that would start everything. Execute quantum displacement. First strike. The Phoenix disappeared. Not with a flash or a bang, but with a subtle ripple in spacetime, as if the ship had simply slipped sideways out of reality. For a brief moment, the 350 crew members felt a peculiar sensation, a tingling that started at their extremities and worked inward, as if their bodies were forgetting they existed. Then, with equal subtlety, the Phoenix reappeared, directly in the center of the Kordak's formation. For 3 crucial seconds, nothing happened. The Kordak ships, their drone cameras still recording, didn't react. In their rigid worldview, what had just occurred was impossible. Ships didn't appear out of nowhere. Matter didn't teleport. The crystals that formed their neural networks struggled to process what their sensors were telling them. Those 3 seconds were all the Phoenix needed. Fire all weapons, Voss commanded, her voice sharp and clear. Lieutenant Commander Jackson's fingers were already moving across his tactical console. The Phoenix's gun ports opened, and the ship unleashed its first barrage of resonance torpedoes. Each one targeted a different Kordak's vessel, each one programmed with the exact harmonic frequency needed to shatter crystal hulls. The torpedoes struck before the Kordax could raise their defensive fields. The effect was immediate and devastating. Instead of conventional explosions, the torpedoes created waves of precisely calibrated energy that traveled through the crystal ships. For a split second, the affected vessels actually glowed brighter as the energy coursed through them. Then they shattered, not into large chunks, but into thousands of glistening fragments that scattered in all directions, sparkling in the starlight. Direct hits on all primary targets, Jackson reported, already lining up the next volley. 5 Kordax cruisers confirmed destroyed. The Kordax fleet finally began to respond. Alarm signals flashed between their ships as weapon systems powered up. But they were still disoriented, struggling to comprehend the sudden appearance of an enemy vessel in their midst and the inexplicable destruction of 5 of their ships. Multiple enemy weapons powering up, Reed called from her station. They're attempting to coordinate their fire. Voss nodded calmly. Dr. Chen, prepare for displacement pattern alpha. Displacement pattern alpha ready. Chen confirmed, her hands steady despite the tension. The tactical display showed energy building in the weapons arrays of 20 Kordax ships, all preparing to fire on the Phoenix position. Execute displacement, Voss ordered. Once again, the Phoenix slipped out of conventional spacetime. Just as the Kordax opened fire, 20 energy beams converged on the empty space where the human ship had been moments before. Several beams continued through the empty space, striking Kordax vessels on the other side of the formation. 2 more crystal ships fractured and broke apart. The Phoenix reappeared 2 kilometers to port of its previous position. Fire second volley. Targets as designated, Voss commanded. Another wave of resonance torpedoes streaked toward the Kordax ships, this time targeting their propulsion systems. 7 more vessels lost power, now drifting helplessly in space. Enemy fleet showing signs of disarray, Reed reported, a hint of satisfaction in her voice. Their communication signals are becoming erratic. The Kordax formation, once a perfect geometric pattern, had collapsed into chaos. Some ships were firing wildly, hoping to hit the Phoenix by luck. Others were trying to regroup into defensive positions. A few had already turned away, their engines glowing as they prepared to flee. Sir, Chief Engineer Marcus Torres called from engineering. The QDS is performing above expected parameters. We're seeing a 15% reduction in power consumption per displacement. Good work, Torres, Voss replied. Keep her running smooth. Captain, Paddle said, leaning closer, the Kordax are adapting. Look at their movement patterns. Voss studied the tactical display. The remaining Kordax ships were indeed changing tactics, splitting into smaller groups of 3 or 4 vessels, spreading out to surround the Phoenix. They're attempting to box us in, Jackson observed. If we displace to avoid one group, we'll be in range of another. Voss smiled slightly. They still don't understand what they're dealing with. Dr. Chen, can the QDS execute a multi-point displacement sequence? Chen looked up from her console, excitement in her eyes despite the gravity of the situation. Theoretically, yes. The system was designed with that capability, but we've never attempted it in actual combat. There's a first time for everything, Voss said. Program a sequence that will allow us to engage each of those small groups individually, no more than 3 seconds at each point. That would mean 7 displacements in rapid succession, Chen warned. The strain on the system will be significant. I know, Voss interrupted. But it's better than letting them trap us. Make it happen, Doctor. As Chen worked, the Kordax continued their repositioning. Their new formation was clever. 12 groups of 3 ships each, arranged in a 3-dimensional sphere around the Phoenix position. No matter where the human ship displaced to, at least one group would have a clear shot. Enemy weapons charging, Reed announced. Energy readings indicate they're overloading their primary systems. They're going for maximum damage. The crystal hulls of the Kordax ships began to glow with accumulated energy, channeling power into their main weapons. They were preparing to unleash everything they had, hoping to overwhelm the Phoenix with sheer firepower. Multi-point displacement sequence programmed and ready, Chen reported. All hands, brace for multiple displacements, Voss announced over the ship-wide comm. Weapons, prepare for rapid target acquisition and firing. Jackson nodded. Ready, Captain. Execute displacement sequence, Voss ordered. The Phoenix disappeared just as the Kordax opened fire. Their energy beams crossed through empty space, several of them intersecting with devastating consequences for their own ships. What followed was something the Kordax had never experienced before, a ghostly attack from an enemy that seemed to be everywhere at once. The Phoenix appeared at the first programmed coordinates, fired a salvo of torpedoes at the nearest Kordax group, then disappeared again before they could respond. 3 seconds later, it materialized at a new position, attacked a different group, and vanished once more. 7 times the Phoenix shifted position. 7 times it delivered precisely targeted strikes. When the sequence was complete, and the ship returned to a stable position outside the Kordax formation, 14 more enemy vessels had been destroyed or disabled. Displacement sequence completed, Chen reported, wiping sweat from her forehead. QDS is showing some strain, but still within operational parameters. Damage report, Voss called out. Minor damage to decks 4 through 7, Paddle replied, scanning his console. 1 casualty in engineering. Torres reports a technician with third-degree burns from an energy feedback surge. Medical is responding. Voss nodded grimly. They'd been lucky so far, but luck never lasted in battle. Enemy status, she asked. Reed studied her sensor readings. 22 Kordax ships destroyed or disabled. 19 operational vessels remaining, but they're no longer in coordinated formation. Several appear to be preparing for faster-than-light jumps. They're trying to retreat, Jackson said, surprise evident in his voice. Not all of them, Voss observed, watching the tactical display. The largest Kordax vessel, a massive capital ship nearly 4 times the size of the Phoenix, was moving to the center of their remaining forces. The smaller ships were repositioning around it, forming a protective screen. What are they doing? Patel wondered aloud. Dr. Chen studied her sensors. Captain, I'm detecting unusual energy patterns. The central ship is connecting power systems with the surrounding vessels. They're creating some kind of unified energy field. The Kordax ships linked together with streams of energy that flowed between their crystal hulls, making them pulse with light. As they watched, the central vessel's weapons array began to glow with increasing intensity. Energy readings off the charts, Reed warned. They're channeling the combined power of all remaining ships into a single weapons platform. Can the QDS get us clear? Voss asked. Chen shook her head. Not in time. The energy buildup suggests they'll fire within 30 seconds. The QDS needs at least 45 seconds to recharge after our last sequence. Voss's mind raced through their options. They couldn't outrun the blast, and they couldn't phase out of its way. That left only one choice. Jackson, target our remaining resonance torpedoes on the energy conduits between ships, she ordered. If we can't avoid that blast, we'll make sure it never fires. Targeting conduits, Jackson confirmed. But our conventional torpedoes may not be precise enough to sever all connections in time. Voss turned to Chen. Doctor, could we use the QDS differently? Instead of displacing the entire ship, could we displace just our torpedoes? Chen's eyes widened. Phase shifting the torpedoes. It's never been attempted, but her fingers flew across her console. Theoretically, yes. We could program them to phase directly inside the energy conduits. Do it, Voss ordered. Jackson, prepare torpedoes for modified launch. Torres, she called over the comm to engineering. We need to divert all available power to the QDS for a targeted displacement. Understood, Captain, Torres replied. Diverting power now. The Kordax combined weapon continued to build energy. The central ship now glowed so brightly it was difficult to look at directly. 20 seconds to their weapons discharge, Reed warned. Torpedoes modified and ready, Jackson reported. QDS targeting solutions locked. Fire, Voss commanded. 6 torpedoes launched from the Phoenix, streaking toward the Kordax formation. Halfway to their targets, they rippled and seemed to fade from view as the QDS affected them. Instead of impacting the crystal hulls, they phased directly into the energy conduits connecting the ships. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, one by one, the conduits began to overload. The energy being channeled between the Kordax vessels suddenly had nowhere to go. It backed up into their systems, cascading through their power networks in a chain reaction of destruction. The first ship exploded in a burst of crystal fragments. Then the second, then the third. The chain reaction moved faster than anyone could track, each detonation triggering the next as the carefully balanced energy network collapsed catastrophically. The massive central ship was the last to go, its weapons arrays still glowing with accumulated energy. When it finally detonated, the explosion was so bright that the Phoenix's viewports automatically darkened to protect the crew's vision. When the light faded, nothing remained of the Kordax formation but drifting crystal debris, sparkling in the starlight like a field of diamonds. All enemy ships destroyed, Reed confirmed, her voice hushed with awe. No survivors detected. The bridge fell silent as the implications sank in. A single human vessel had just defeated a Kordax fleet that outnumbered it 43-1. Damage report, Voss finally said, breaking the silence. QDS operating at 68% efficiency, Chen reported. The targeted displacement put significant strain on the system, but it's still functional. Minor hull breaches on decks 2 and 9, Patil added. Repair teams responding. Casualties reported at 12 injured, no fatalities. Voss nodded, relief washing over her. They had accomplished their mission at a cost far lower than anyone had dared hope. But she knew this was just the beginning. The Kordax would return, and in greater numbers. Reed, prepare a message for transmission on all Kordax frequencies, Voss ordered. Video and audio, maximum range. Message ready, Captain, Reed confirmed moments later. Voss stood, straightening her uniform, and faced the camera. When she spoke, her voice was calm and measured, but with an undercurrent of steel. This message is for the Kordax leadership. Today, 1 human ship destroyed your fleet. We could have sent 20. Remember Nova Station. Remember the 12,000 innocent lives you took. And remember what happened when you returned. This is not a war you can win. Stay away from human space, or next time, we won't stop at 1 fleet. She nodded, and Reed ended the transmission. Set course for Earth, Lieutenant, Voss ordered. Let's go home. As the Phoenix turned away from the debris field, leaving behind the shattered remains of the Kordax fleet, Voss knew their victory today had changed everything. The quantum displacement system had proven itself beyond all expectations. Humanity now had a weapon that could stand against the Kordax threat. But more importantly, they had sent a message that would echo across the galaxy. Humanity would not go quietly. They would not surrender. And they were far more dangerous than anyone had imagined. Turning the tide. 6 hours after the battle, Captain Voss still hadn't left the bridge. Despite Patil's repeated suggestions that she get some rest, she remained at her post, reviewing sensor data and damage reports. The Phoenix was limping home at 3/4 speed, the QDS offline for repairs, and the hull bearing the scars of their encounter with the Kordax fleet. Captain, Dr. Chen called from her station, breaking the relative quiet of the bridge. I've been analyzing the sensor data from the battle, and I found something interesting. Voss moved to stand behind Chen's chair. What is it, Doctor? Chen pointed to a series of readings on her screen. The QDS was collecting data throughout the engagement, recording how the Kordax ships moved, how their weapons functioned, how their crews responded to our tactics. It wasn't just executing our commands, it was learning. Voss frowned. Learning? The QDS is advanced, but it's not an artificial intelligence. Not in the conventional sense, Chen agreed. But its quantum processors operate on principles that allow for a form of adaptation. Look at these efficiency curves. She pulled up a graph showing the power consumption of the QDS during each displacement. The system was becoming more efficient with each jump, reducing power requirements and calculating more precise re-entry points. Patel joined them, studying the data. Could this be why the targeted torpedo displacement worked? The system figured out how to do it on its own. Chen nodded excitedly. Exactly. When we asked it to phase the torpedoes instead of the whole ship, it drew on everything it had learned about Kordak's energy signatures to calculate the perfect insertion points. Voss was about to respond when Reed interrupted from the communication station. "Captain, we're receiving a priority transmission from Earth Command. Admiral Zhao requests immediate contact." Voss straightened her uniform and moved to the command chair. "Put him through." The main view screen activated, showing the stern face of Admiral Liang Zhao, commander of Earth's defense forces. Despite the apparent victory, his expression remained grave. "Captain Voss," he acknowledged with a curt nod, "we've received your preliminary report. 43 Kordax vessels destroyed or disabled by a single ship. Under normal circumstances, I'd say that was impossible." "Nothing about the Phoenix is normal, Admiral," Voss replied. "The QDS performed even better than expected." "So I see." Zhao's expression softened slightly. "What you've accomplished today changes everything, Captain. The Council was ready to negotiate a surrender. Now they're talking about taking the fight to the Kordax." Voss frowned. "With respect, Admiral, that would be premature. We won one battle, but the Kordax Empire has thousands of ships, and they'll adapt to our technology, given time. Which is why we need to act quickly," Zhao countered. "Earth Command is accelerating production of QDS-equipped vessels. The first 3 will be operational within 6 months." 6 months? Voss shook her head. "The Kordax won't wait that long to retaliate. And next time, they'll come prepared for displacement tactics. Which brings me to your new orders," Zhao said. "The Phoenix is to proceed to the Arcturus shipyards for immediate refit and repairs. Once complete, you'll take command of Task Force Vanguard, the first battle group equipped with QDS technology." Voss felt a cold weight settle in her stomach. Task Force Vanguard. 4 ships initially, growing to 12 by year's end. Your mission will be to conduct hit-and-run operations against Kordax outposts and supply lines. Keep them off balance while we build up our forces. A year of raids against the most powerful empire in known space. Voss thought of her daughter's upcoming birthday, of the promise she'd made to be there. Another promise she wouldn't be able to keep. "When do we deploy?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. "As soon as the Phoenix is ready. 2 weeks, maybe 3. Zhao's expression softened further. "I know what I'm asking of you and your crew, Ilara. But after what happened at Nova Station, we need to show the Kordax the humans aren't easy prey." "We already showed them that, Admiral," Voss replied. "But I understand. The Phoenix will be ready." After Zhao signed off, Voss remained silent for a long moment, contemplating what lay ahead. Then the ship's proximity alert sounded, pulling her from her thoughts. Multiple contacts dropping out of FTL. Reed called, her voice tense. "Kordax signatures. They're right on top of us." The tactical display showed 12 crystal ships materializing around the Phoenix, cutting off their route to Earth. These weren't the smaller vessels they'd faced earlier. These were dreadnoughts, the heaviest class in the Kordax fleet. "Battle stations," Voss ordered, adrenaline pushing aside her fatigue. "Shields to maximum. Jackson, bring weapons online." "QDS is still offline," Chen reported, fingers flying across her console. "Engineering reports minimum 2 hours before it's operational again." Without the QDS, they couldn't disappear, couldn't avoid the coming attack. They would have to fight conventionally against ships that outgunned them 5-1. "They were waiting for us," Paddle realized aloud. "They must have predicted our course back to Earth. Or they track our transmission to Earth Command," Voss suggested. Either way, we're in trouble. How many resonance torpedoes do we have left? 4, Jackson replied grimly. Not enough to take out 12 dreadnoughts. The Kordak ships moved into position, surrounding the Phoenix in a perfect sphere. Unlike the previous fleet, these vessels moved with cold precision, maintaining exact distances between each ship. There would be no wild firing, no easy opportunities to turn their own weapons against them. They're powering up weapons, Reed warned. Energy readings indicate coordinated firing patterns. They're going to hit us from all directions simultaneously. Voss's mind raced through their options, each more desperate than the last. Without the QDS, conventional tactics wouldn't save them. They needed something unexpected, something the Kordaks couldn't anticipate. Then she remembered Chen's discovery. The QDS had been learning throughout the battle, learning about Kordak ships, Kordak's tactics, Kordak's weaknesses. Dr. Chen, Voss said suddenly, you said the QDS was collecting data on the Kordaks. Can we access that data without bringing the system fully online? Chen looked puzzled, but nodded. Yes, the database is separate from the displacement functions. Why? Because we need to know everything it learned about Kordak's communication systems, Voss explained. Specifically, how their ships coordinate in combat. Understanding dawned in Chen's eyes. You want to disrupt their coordination. Exactly. Voss turned to Reed. Lieutenant, can you reconfigure our comm array to broadcast on Kordak's frequencies? Reed hesitated. Yes, but they use crystalline quantum entanglement for ship-to-ship communications. We can't intercept or block those signals. We don't need to block them, Voss said. We just need to add to them. Jackson, what's the status of our electronic warfare suite? Fully operational, Captain. But Kordak systems are notoriously resistant to conventional ECM. We won't use conventional methods, Voss replied. Dr. Chen, I need you to pull everything the QDS learned about Kordak's communication patterns and feed it to Lieutenant Reed. Reed, use that data to craft a signal that mimics their command protocols, specifically emergency evasive orders. Reed's eyes widened. You want to trick their ships into thinking they're receiving conflicting orders. Not conflicting, Voss corrected. Identical orders, but timed microseconds apart. Their crystalline neural networks process information sequentially. If they receive the same emergency command multiple times in rapid succession, it could create a feedback loop. Chen finished, excitement in her voice. Their systems would be caught trying to execute the same emergency procedure over and over. How long? Voss asked. Reed and Chen exchanged glances. 10 minutes to craft the signal. Reed estimated. Maybe less with the QDS data. You have 5, Voss told them. They won't wait longer than that to fire. As Reed and Chen worked frantically, the Kordak's dreadnoughts continued their ominous approach, closing the circle around the Phoenix. Their weapons are at 80% charge, Jackson reported. Estimated time to firing. 4 minutes, 30 seconds. Keep our shields rotating frequencies, Voss ordered. They'll try to match their weapons to our shield harmonics. The bridge fell into tense silence, broken only by the quiet beeps of consoles and the murmured exchanges between Reed and Chen as they crafted their countermeasure. 3 minutes to enemy weapons discharge, Jackson announced. Patil moved closer to Voss. If this doesn't work, he began quietly. It will work, Voss interrupted. It has to. Signal configuration complete, Reed called. Ready to broadcast on your command. Their weapons are at 95% charge, Jackson warned. 2 minutes remaining. Voss took a deep breath. Begin transmission. All Kordak's frequencies. Maximum power. Reed activated the countermeasure. For several seconds, nothing appeared to change. The Kordak ships maintained their perfect formation, their weapons still building power. No effect, Patel observed tensely. Wait for it, Voss said, eyes fixed on the tactical display. 30 seconds passed. Then, almost imperceptibly, the formation began to change. One dreadnought shifted position slightly, then another. Their movements were small at first, barely noticeable, but accelerating. "It's working," Chen whispered. "Their neural networks are caught in the loop, trying to execute emergency evasion procedures, but receiving the command again before they can complete it." On the tactical display, the perfect sphere of Kordak ships dissolved into chaos. Vessels that had been holding precise positions now moved erratically, some accelerating, others spinning in place. Their weapons, still charged to near maximum power, fired randomly into space. "They've lost coordinated fire control," Jackson reported, unable to keep the amazement from his voice. "Their shots are going wide." Two of the Kordak's dreadnoughts, caught in their confused maneuvering, collided with each other. Their crystal hulls shattered on impact, the energy from their charged weapons releasing in a massive explosion that damaged 3 more nearby vessels. "Now's our chance," Voss said. "Jackson, target the 4 remaining resonance torpedoes on the lead dreadnought, the one that still appears to be maintaining some control." "Torpedoes locked," Jackson confirmed. "Fire." The Phoenix's last resonance torpedoes streaked toward the Kordak's flagship, the massive crystal vessel, its systems still struggling with the communication loop, failed to raise defensive measures in time. The torpedoes struck in perfect sequence, each one amplifying the effect of the last. The dreadnought's hull vibrated, glowed, and finally shattered in a spectacular cascade of crystal fragments. "Reed, hail the remaining Kordak's vessels," Voss ordered. "All frequencies, clear signal." When Reed nodded that the channel was open, Voss spoke clearly and firmly. "Kordak's vessels, this is Captain Ilara Voss of the UES Phoenix. Your flagship is destroyed. Your formation is broken. You have experienced firsthand what one human ship can do. Imagine what an entire fleet would do. Return to your territory and deliver this message to your leaders. Human space is closed to you. Any further incursions will be met with the full force of Earth's defenses." She gestured for Reed to end the transmission. For a tense moment, no one on the bridge spoke or moved, all eyes fixed on the tactical display showing the remaining Kordak ships. One by one, the surviving dreadnoughts began to turn away. Their engines flared to life as they accelerated out of the system, leaving behind the shattered remains of their comrades. "They're retreating," Reed confirmed. "All Kordak's vessels are breaking contact and preparing for FTL jumps." A collective breath seemed to release across the bridge. Voss finally allowed herself to sink back into her command chair, the adrenaline that had been sustaining her beginning to ebb. "Damage report," she requested, her voice finally betraying her exhaustion. "Minimal damage from energy dispersal," Paddle reported. "No casualties. The shields held." Voss nodded. "Set course for Arcturus shipyards, best possible speed, and get me a secure channel to Admiral Zhao. He needs to know what just happened." As the bridge crew carried out her orders, Voss found herself thinking again of her daughter and the birthday she would miss. But perhaps she realized she had just given Celia a different kind of gift. A future where humans didn't live in fear of the Kordaks. A future where humanity stood tall among the stars, not because they had the biggest fleet or the most advanced technology, but because they refused to be intimidated.